We were at the airport heading to Hawaii. At check-in, my brother waved his first-class ticket in my face while smirking. "Economy again, Naomi? I thought you had a real job now." His wife laughed, adjusting her designer sunglasses. My parents stood silent, their eyes darting between us. I smiled and handed him my boarding pass instead. "Actually, Marcus, I upgraded you. Enjoy the extra legroom." His face went pale. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I just thought you deserved exactly what you've earned," I replied calmly. The SeaTac International Airport buzzed with the chaos of summer travel. Families corralled excited children, business travelers rushed past with roller bags, and somewhere nearby, a gate agent announced final boarding. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh, unflattering glow. I stood at the check-in counter for Hawaiian Airlines, my modest carry-on beside me, watching my older brother Marcus swagger toward the first-class line. Marcus was everything I apparently wasn't. At 32, he drove a Tesla Model S, lived in a modern Craftsman in Queen Anne, worth $850, and wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. His wife Vanessa, a lifestyle influencer with 340,000 followers, stood beside him in head-to-toe designer wear, her Birkin bag alone worth more than I made in 3 months. "Naomi," my mother Patricia called from behind me, pulling my father Robert along. At 58, Mom still wore the sensible clothing of her teaching years, though she'd retired 2 years ago. Dad, 60 and recently retired from nursing, carried their shared suitcase with the careful movements of someone whose back had seen too many 12-hour shifts. "There you are," Mom said, slightly breathless. "Did you check in already?" "Just about to," I replied, stepping up to the kiosk. My hands moved automatically through the prompts, scanning my ID, answering the security questions. The machine beeped and printed my boarding pass. Seat 32B, middle seat, economy. "Naomi?" Marcus's voice cut through the ambient airport noise. He stood at the first-class counter now, his boarding pass prominently displayed. "Still flying with the common people, I see?" Vanessa giggled, that performative sound she used in her Instagram stories. "Oh, Marcus, don't tease your sister," but her smile said she enjoyed watching. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest. This was nothing new. Marcus had been lording his success over me since he started his financial consulting business 5 years ago. Every family dinner became a showcase for his latest acquisition, his newest client, his expanding portfolio. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks at CloudSync Technologies, managing operations for a startup that was always 6 months away from either massive success or catastrophic failure. "I'm fine with economy," I said evenly, walking toward them. "Not all of us need to display our wealth. Wealth that comes from smart decisions," Marcus replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "Maybe if you'd listened to me about investments instead of wasting your time at that startup, you could afford first class too." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Marcus, that's enough." But Marcus wasn't finished. He never was. "I offered to help you, Naomi, multiple times. But you always think you know better." He waved his first-class boarding pass again, the gesture deliberate and mocking. "This is what happens when you make good financial choices." Vanessa pulled out her phone, angling it for a selfie with Marcus and the first-class signage behind them. "Babe, smile. This is perfect for the grid." Something inside me shifted. I'd spent years being the responsible one, the one who worked hard and saved carefully, while Marcus seemed to float from success to success. Our parents had recently invested their retirement savings with him, trusting his promises of guaranteed returns. They'd given him $120,000, the bulk of what they'd saved from decades of teaching and nursing. I walked up to Marcus and held out my boarding pass. "You know what? You're right. You deserve first class." He blinked, confused. "What?" "Take it," I said, smiling. "Trade with me. You and Vanessa can sit in first class together. I'll take your economy seats." Vanessa lowered her phone, her perfectly microbladed eyebrows furrowing. "Wait, you have economy seats? The system must have made a mistake when I booked," Marcus said quickly, his voice tight. "I definitely selected first class for both of us." I glanced at the boarding pass he was still holding. Seat 38D, economy. Window seat, sure, but definitely not first class. "No mistake," I said softly, letting my smile widen. "You got exactly what you paid for." Marcus's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous. There's obviously been an error." He turned to the gate agent. "Excuse me, I need to speak with someone about upgrading these tickets." The agent, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, barely glanced up from her computer. "Upgrades at the gate start at $350 per person, sir." "That's fine," Marcus said, pulling out his credit card with a flourish. The agent swiped it. Waited. Swiped again. "I'm sorry, sir. This card is being declined. That's impossible, Marcus snapped. Try again. She did. Same result. Marcus pulled out another card. A Black American Express that he'd once bragged gave him access to exclusive airport lounges. Declined. Vanessa's face had gone from Instagram ready to genuinely worried. Marcus, what's going on? Nothing, he said through gritted teeth. The system is obviously having issues. We'll sort it out at the gate. He grabbed both their boarding passes, shooting me a look of pure venom. This isn't over, Naomi. They walked toward security. Vanessa's high heels clicking rapidly on the tile floor, Marcus's back rigid with humiliation. My mother touched my arm. Sweetie, what was that about? Nothing, Mom, I replied, picking up my carry-on. Just Marcus being Marcus. But it wasn't nothing. 3 days ago, I'd been at my parents' house helping them set up their new TV when I'd used the family laptop, the one everyone shared. Marcus had forgotten to log out of his email. I hadn't meant to snoop at first, but then I saw the subject lines. Wire transfer delayed. Client withdrawal request urgent. Need liquidity immediately. I'd opened one email, then another, then another. Marcus wasn't a successful financial consultant. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He was using new client investments to pay returns to existing clients, creating the illusion of massive profits. The Tesla, the house, the designer clothes, Vanessa's lavish lifestyle, all of it funded by money that belonged to other people. Money he'd never actually invested. Money that was rapidly running out, including our parents' $120,000. I'd spent the last 3 days digging deeper, accessing public records, business filings, court documents. I'd created a timeline of his business dealings, mapped out his client network, documented every false promise and fraudulent statement I could find. And I'd made some phone calls. To the Securities and Exchange Commission, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, to 3 separate investigative journalists who specialized in white-collar crime. I'd also called Hawaiian Airlines and used my credit card points to upgrade my parents to first class, ensuring they'd have a comfortable flight. Marcus's tickets remained exactly as he'd purchased them. Economy middle seats that he'd booked back in February when he still had access to liquidity. As we moved through security, I watched Marcus argue with a TSA agent about something trivial, his face still flushed with anger and embarrassment. Vanessa stood slightly apart from him, scrolling through her phone with increasing agitation, probably checking their bank accounts. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Jade. Did you really do it? I typed back. First move complete. He suspects nothing. You're savage and I love it, Jade responded. Call me when you land. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and followed my parents through security. My mother kept glancing back at Marcus, worry creasing her face. She had no idea that her precious son had stolen from her, that his success was built on a foundation of lies and stolen money, but she would know soon. They all would. As I settled into my seat in first class, courtesy of my upgrade, I pulled out the small tablet I'd brought specifically for this flight. On it, I'd saved every piece of evidence I'd collected, bank statements showing Marcus's clients' money being shuffled between accounts to hide the fact that no actual investing was occurring. Emails where he promised guaranteed returns that were mathematically impossible. Text messages to Vanessa discussing their need to keep up appearances until he could secure more capital. The plane began to taxi. I looked across the aisle to where my parents sat, both already dozing off. Behind me, several rows back in economy, I could just make out Marcus's voice raised in complaint about something. This trip to Hawaii was supposed to be a family celebration. Marcus had insisted on organizing it, had convinced our parents to splurge on the resort, had promised it would be a week they'd never forget. He was right about that last part, just not in the way he'd imagined. The Grand Wiley Resort sprawled across 40 acres of Maui coastline, like something from a fever dream. 9 pools connected by waterfalls and slides, restaurants with ocean views, tropical gardens that required a staff of 20 to maintain. The kind of place where a basic room started at $600 per night, and Marcus had booked the family into a 3-bedroom suite for 7 nights. I stood in the open-air lobby watching Marcus's face as the receptionist processed his credit card. Once, twice, 3 times. Sir, I'm showing this card as declined, she said, her professional smile never wavering. Do you have another form of payment? Marcus's jaw clenched. He pulled out his wallet, extracting cards one by one. The Amex. Declined. The Visa signature. Declined. Even his supposedly unlimited Chase Sapphire Reserve. Declined. Vanessa stood beside him, her Instagram perfect composure cracking. "Marcus? What the hell? There's obviously a fraud alert," he said loudly, as if volume would make it true. "My cards are frozen for security reasons. I'll call the banks and sort this out." My father stepped forward, pulling out his own worn debit card. "We can cover it for now, son." "No," I said, moving between them. I looked directly at the receptionist. "How much is the total?" She glanced at her screen. "The suite is $4,200 plus tax for the week, and there's a $1,500 incidental hold." I pulled out my corporate credit card, the one CloudSync provided for business travel. "Put it on this. I'll expense it as a team-building retreat." Marcus's eyes widened. "You can't afford this, Naomi." "Apparently neither can you," I replied, handing the card to the receptionist. The transaction went through immediately. 20 minutes later, we gathered in the suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Pacific, where the afternoon sun turned the water into liquid gold. The space was beautiful. Marble floors, Hawaiian artwork, a kitchen stocked with champagne and tropical fruit. Marcus had chosen it to showcase his success. Now he stood in the corner, phone pressed to his ear, having increasingly agitated conversations with various banks. Vanessa had disappeared onto the lanai, her own phone calls punctuated by sharp, angry whispers. My mother pulled me aside. "Sweetie, what's going on? Marcus seems very stressed." "I don't know, Mom," I lied. "Maybe he's having cash flow problems, but he told us his business was doing so well," she said, worry creasing her forehead. "He said our investment was earning 22% annually. He showed us statements. 22%. I'd seen those statements. They were fiction, created in Excel, showing returns that didn't exist on investments that had never been made. Maybe you should ask him about that," I suggested gently. That evening, Marcus insisted on taking everyone to Spago, Wolfgang Puck's restaurant at the Four Seasons. It was a 30-minute drive, and the reservation had been made months ago. I could see him trying to salvage his image, to prove that this morning's credit card issues were just a temporary glitch. The restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking Wiley Beach, all elegant simplicity and ocean breezes. Our table had a perfect view of the sunset. Marcus ordered an expensive bottle of wine without looking at the price, his old confidence returning. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "And to success." I raised my glass but didn't drink. Instead, I watched Vanessa, who was compulsively checking her phone between courses. Her influencer persona had completely vanished. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wine. Halfway through dinner, my father's phone rang. He excused himself to take the call outside. When he returned 5 minutes later, his face was ashen. "That was Edward Chen," he said quietly. Edward was my parents' neighbor, a retired accountant who'd also invested with Marcus. He got a letter from the SEC today. They're investigating Marcus's firm for securities fraud. The table fell silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away. Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. "That's ridiculous. Edward is mistaken. He read me the letter," my father continued, his voice steady but cold. "It specifically names Reeves Financial Consulting. It mentions potential charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and operating an unlicensed investment scheme." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Marcus, what is he talking about?" "It's nothing," Marcus said, but his voice had lost all its conviction. "Some disgruntled client probably filed a complaint. It happens in my industry. The SEC investigates and finds nothing wrong." I set down my water glass carefully. Is that what happened with Janet Morrison? Or Kevin Park? Or the Dunlap family? Marcus's head snapped toward me. "What?" "Those are just 3 of the 17 people I've spoken to in the last week," I continued, my voice calm and measured. "People who invested with you, people who requested withdrawals and were told there were temporary liquidity issues, people who are now realizing their money is gone." Vanessa made a small choked sound. "You've been talking to my clients?" Marcus stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You had no right?" "I had every right," I interrupted, "especially since 2 of those clients are our parents." My mother looked between us, confusion and dawning horror on her face. "Naomi, what are you saying?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd created. "I'm saying that Marcus isn't a successful financial consultant. He's been running a Ponzi scheme. He takes money from new investors and uses it to pay fake returns to existing investors. He never actually invests the money. It just sits in his operating account until he needs it for his lifestyle, or to pay someone who asks for a withdrawal." "That's insane," Marcus said, but he'd gone pale. "You're making this up because you're jealous." "Am I?" I swiped through screenshots. Here's your client account spreadsheet, Marcus. The real one, not the fake statements you send out. It shows you've collected $2.3 million from 47 different investors over the last 5 years. It also shows your current liquid assets are $63,000. Where did the rest go? I looked at Vanessa. About $800,000 went to your lifestyle. The house down payment, the Tesla lease, your Birkin bags, the trips to Dubai and Bali, all documented beautifully on your Instagram, by the way. Another $400,000 went to paying fake returns to early investors to keep them happy. And the rest? Gambling debts, bad cryptocurrency bets, and general living expenses. My father's face had turned to stone. Our $120,000? Gone, I said simply. Spent within 6 weeks of you giving it to him. $40,000 paid off Marcus's margin call when his stock bets went south. The rest paid for this house, the Tesla, and about $30,000 in credit card debt. Marcus stumbled backward. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. I pulled a slim folder from my bag. These are copies. I've already given the originals to the SEC, the FBI, and the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. I've also provided them with the names and contact information of every victim I could identify, along with documented evidence of your fraudulent statements, your commingling of funds, and your complete lack of proper licensing. The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners were watching our table now, drawn by the raised voices and obvious confrontation. Vanessa burst into tears. You destroyed us. You destroyed everything. No, I said, looking directly at Marcus. He destroyed everything. I just documented it. My mother was crying now too, but silently, tears streaming down her face as she clutched my father's hand. Dad just stared at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Disappointment mixed with disgust. Marcus tried one more time. Mom, Dad, you can't believe her. She's always been jealous of me. This is some kind of elaborate revenge because I was successful and she wasn't. Stop, my father said, his voice cutting through Marcus's excuses. Just stop, son. The word son came out like an epithet. Marcus's phone buzzed. Then again, and again. He looked down at the screen and whatever he saw there made his face crumble. He sank back into his chair, all the fight draining out of him. That's probably your former clients, I said. I contacted all of them yesterday, told them what I'd found, and suggested they might want to speak with the authorities. Several of them are filing police reports tonight. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward. I can't do this. She grabbed her purse and fled toward the exit, her sobs echoing back to our table. Marcus looked up at me, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Naomi, please. If this goes forward, I'll go to prison. Yes, I agreed. You probably will. What about Vanessa? What about our life? What about Mom and Dad's retirement? I countered. What about Edward Chen's life savings? What about the Dunlap family's college fund for their kids? You stole from all of them. You looked them in the eye, promised their money was safe, and then you spent it on yourself. The restaurant manager approached our table, concern on his face. Is everything all right here? My father stood, pulling out his wallet. We're leaving. How much for the meal? It's already been charged to Mr. Reeves's card, sir. No, my father said firmly. I'll pay cash. I don't want a penny of his stolen money paying for anything. As we left the restaurant, Marcus remained at the table, his phone continuing to buzz with incoming calls and messages. Through the window, I could see him with his head in his hands. In the parking lot, my mother turned to me. How long have you known? 3 days before we left for this trip. I found his emails on the family laptop. And you waited until now to tell us? I needed to gather evidence first, I explained. I needed to make sure I had everything documented properly so he couldn't talk his way out of it. Marcus is very good at explaining away problems, at making people doubt what they know is true. I needed to build a case that was airtight. My father pulled me into a hug. You could have just told us, sweetheart. You didn't have to handle this alone. Yes, I did, I said into his shoulder. If I'd come to you with suspicions, you would have confronted him. He would have denied everything and made me look paranoid. This way, there's no denying it. We drove back to the Grand Wailea in silence. When we reached the suite, Vanessa was in one of the bedrooms, packing her suitcases and crying. Marcus still hadn't returned. My mother sat on the couch, staring out at the dark ocean. $120,000. That was everything we'd saved. Your father worked double shifts for years. I tutored students after school. We were so careful. I know, Mom. And we just gave it to him. We trusted him. My father sat beside her. We'll be okay, Patricia. We still have our pensions. We still have the house. We'll survive. But I could hear the tremor in his voice. They'd been planning to travel in retirement, to see the grandchildren they hoped Marcus or I would eventually give them. Now they'd be watching every dollar, hoping nothing major broke down, praying they stayed healthy enough to avoid catastrophic medical bills. Marcus finally returned to the suite around midnight. He went straight to the bedroom he was sharing with Vanessa. I could hear them arguing, her voice sharp and accusatory, his defensive and desperate. Around 2 a.m, I heard the suite door open and close. Looking out, I saw Marcus sitting on the lanai in the darkness. I grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen and joined him. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "Did you enjoy it? Destroying me in front of everyone?" "Not particularly," I said honestly, "but someone had to stop you." "I was going to pay them back," he said. "All of them. I just needed more time. I had some investments that were about to mature. I was going to make everything right." "Marcus, you don't even have active investments. You spent the money. All of it. There was nothing to mature." He was silent for a long moment. Finally, he asked, "What happens now?" "The SEC will formally charge you. The FBI will probably file federal wire fraud charges. The state will likely bring charges too. Your clients will sue you in civil court. You'll declare bankruptcy, but that won't discharge fraud-related debts. Vanessa will probably divorce you. You'll lose the house, the car, everything, and then you'll go to trial." "How long?" "For the investigation and trial? Maybe 2 years. For prison time if you're convicted." I paused. Federal securities fraud carries up to 20 years per count. You have dozens of victims. Even with a plea deal, you're looking at a decade minimum. He put his head in his hands. "I'm 32 years old." "Yes. And when you get out, you'll be in your 40s, you'll be a convicted felon, and you'll probably still owe restitution to your victims that you'll spend the rest of your life paying off." "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you do this to me? I'm your brother." I stood up. "Because you're my brother. Because Mom and Dad trusted you with their life savings. Because you were supposed to be better than this." I turned to go back inside, then stopped. "And because when we were at the airport, you waved that boarding pass in my face like I was worthless. Like working hard at an honest job made me less than you. You wanted me to know my place. Well, now you know yours." I left him sitting in the darkness and went to bed. The Hawaiian sun rose over Maui like nothing had happened. The ocean sparkled. The palm trees swayed. The resort guests wandered toward breakfast buffets and beach chairs, oblivious to the fact that in Suite 4012, a family was disintegrating. Vanessa left on the first available flight, booking it herself on her personal credit card after Marcus's cards continued to be declined. She didn't say goodbye. She simply walked out with her Louis Vuitton luggage. Her influencer mask finally shattered. I'd later learn that she filed for divorce within 48 hours, claiming she'd been as much a victim of Marcus's fraud as anyone. Her Instagram went dark for 3 weeks before she returned with a tearful video about surviving narcissistic financial abuse that got 2.7 million views. Marcus spent the next 2 days locked in his bedroom, emerging only for food and bathroom breaks. My parents didn't speak to him. When he tried to approach my mother, she physically turned her back. My father, the man who'd taught us both to ride bikes and helped with homework and never missed a single Little League game, looked at Marcus like he was a stranger who'd invaded his home. On our 3rd day in Maui, I received a call from Special Agent Rebecca Torres of the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. "Miss Reeves, thank you for your cooperation," she said, her voice professional but warm. "The documentation you provided has been extremely helpful. We've executed search warrants on your brother's home, office, and bank accounts." I'd stepped out onto the suite's private lanai for privacy. Below me, families played in the resort pools, children's laughter floating up like music. "What did you find?" "Exactly what you described. We've also identified 6 additional victims beyond the ones you contacted. The total fraud amount is approximately $2.7 million. We're working with the SEC and state regulators to freeze what few assets remain." "How much is left?" $41,000 across all accounts. The house has negative equity due to a second mortgage he took out last year. The Tesla is leased. Most of the physical assets, furniture, electronics, clothing, won't cover even a fraction of what he owes. I closed my eyes. $41,000 out of $2.7 million. Miss Reeves, I need to ask you something. Agent Torres continued. When you discovered this fraud, why didn't you immediately alert your parents? Why did you wait? Because I needed to make sure I was right, I said, and because I knew Marcus. If I'd gone to them with suspicions, he would have convinced them I was jealous or mistaken or trying to sabotage him. He's always been the golden child. I needed irrefutable evidence. That was smart, she said. But it must have been difficult sitting on this knowledge. The difficult part was watching him humiliate me at the airport, I admitted, knowing what he'd done while he waved his fake success in my face. After the call ended, I found my father sitting alone in the living room, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. The FBI called, I said, sitting beside him. They've confirmed everything. Marcus defrauded his clients of $2.7 million. Dad nodded slowly. How much of that was ours? 4%. But that doesn't make it hurt less, does it? No. He set down his coffee cup. You know what the worst part is? Not the money. I mean, yes, the money is devastating. But the worst part is that I don't know when he became this person. Was he always capable of this? Did we miss signs? Or did something change in him? I think it started small, I said. He probably told himself he was borrowing from one client to pay another, that he'd pay it back when his actual investments performed. Then the investments didn't perform, so he needed more money. And then he was in too deep to get out. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It's not. It's just how these things usually happen. Fraud doesn't typically start with someone deciding to steal millions. It starts with one small compromise, one rationalization, and then the hole gets deeper and deeper until they can't climb out. My mother emerged from her bedroom, her eyes red from crying. She'd barely eaten in 3 days. Naomi, I need you to explain something to me. How did he fake the investment statements? They looked so official. I pulled out my tablet and showed her the truth. Marcus had created fake letterhead for a non-existent brokerage firm. He'd used Excel to generate statements showing consistent gains, complete with made-up stock tickers and mutual fund names. He'd even created a fake website for the brokerage, complete with login credentials that showed personalized portfolios for each client. It's actually not that hard to do, I explained. The financial services industry relies heavily on trust. Most people don't verify their statements against independent sources. They just trust that their advisor is telling them the truth. How did you know to check? Mom asked. I didn't plan to. It was pure accident. I used the family laptop and Marcus hadn't logged out of his email. I saw messages from clients demanding their money, and it didn't make sense. If his business was doing so well, why were people demanding withdrawals? So I dug deeper. Over the next few days, I showed them everything I'd found. The real bank statements. The emails where Marcus discussed his desperation. The credit card bills showing luxury purchases charged while client funds sat in his operating account. The text messages to Vanessa about one more big score that would solve all their problems. My father absorbed it all with stoic silence. My mother cried. And Marcus stayed in his room, his presence in the suite like a wound that wouldn't heal. On our 5th day in Maui, I went for a walk on the beach alone. The sand was white and soft, the water impossibly blue. Tourists snorkeled in the shallows. A wedding party posed for photos near the water's edge, the bride's dress billowing in the breeze. My phone rang. Jade, how's paradise? She asked. Complicated, I said, filling her in on the last few days. Jesus, Naomi, are you okay? Honestly? I don't know. Part of me feels vindicated. Marcus spent years making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like my choices were inferior to his. Turns out his entire life was a lie. But another part of me just feels sad. He's still my brother, and he destroyed so many lives, including his own. You didn't destroy them, Jade said firmly. He did. You just stopped him from destroying more. I keep thinking about when we were kids, I said. Marcus used to share his Halloween candy with me. He taught me to swim. When I was 12 and some boys at school were bullying me, he scared them so badly they never bothered me again. That person is in there somewhere, but I don't know when he disappeared. Money changes people, Jade said. Or maybe it just reveals who they really are. That evening, Marcus finally emerged from his room and asked if we could talk. We sat on the lanai while my parents stayed inside, giving us privacy but watching through the glass. I spoke with an attorney today, Marcus said. His voice was flat, defeated. He says I'll probably get 15 to 20 years if convicted at trial, 10 to 12 if I plead guilty and cooperate. That sounds right, I said. Vanessa's divorce attorney sent papers. She's claiming I defrauded her too, that she had no knowledge of my business practices. Her lawyer is trying to protect her influencer income and assets. Is that true? Did she know? He was quiet for a moment. She knew something was wrong. I told her we were having cash flow issues, that some investments hadn't performed well, but that everything would be fine. She never asked hard questions because she didn't want to know the answers. Willful ignorance? Yes. He turned to look at me. I'm sorry, Naomi, for everything. For the way I treated you, for stealing from Mom and Dad, for all of it. Why did you do it? I asked. Why did you steal from our parents? You could have just let them keep their money. Because I was drowning, he said. I'd already used all the client money. I had people demanding withdrawals I couldn't pay. I thought if I could hold on a little longer, if I could keep up appearances, I could find a way to fix it. The longer I went, the more people I brought in, the deeper the hole got. Your parents' money bought me a few more months, that's all. Did you plan to pay them back? I told myself I would. I really believed that I'd find a way to make them whole, but deep down, I knew it was gone. I knew they'd never see that money again. I watched the sun setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The FBI says you'll never be able to pay back what you stole. Even with restitution orders, the math doesn't work. You destroyed people's retirements, their children's college funds, their savings. And you did it while driving a Tesla and buying your wife Birkin bags. I know. No, Marcus, I don't think you do. Because if you really understood, you wouldn't have spent 3 days hiding in your room feeling sorry for yourself. You'd be out there trying to make amends somehow, even if it's impossible. You'd be talking to every victim, apologizing, taking responsibility. What difference would that make? Maybe none, I admitted, but it would at least show you understand the magnitude of what you've done. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, Marcus asked, "Do you hate me?" I considered the question carefully. No. But I don't like who you became, and I don't know if the brother I grew up with still exists under all the lies and theft. He does, Marcus said quietly. He's still here. He's just buried under 4 years of terrible decisions. Then maybe prison will give you time to find him again. After Marcus went back inside, I stayed on the lanai alone. My phone buzzed with messages from the FBI, from the SEC, from several of Marcus's victims thanking me for bringing his fraud to light. One message was from Edward Chen, my parents' neighbor. You saved us from losing even more. Your parents raised a good daughter. But had they raised a good son? Or had something in Marcus always been broken, just waiting for the right circumstances to reveal itself? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. We returned to Seattle on a gray morning, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that matched the heaviness we all carried. Marcus flew separately, Agent Torres having requested he come in for additional questioning. Vanessa had already cleaned out their house, taking everything she could claim as personal property before the asset seizure began. My parents moved through their house like ghosts, everything familiar but forever changed. The living room where we'd celebrated holidays. The kitchen where Marcus had once brought his fake investment statements to show them their growing portfolio. Every surface held memories of the son they thought they knew. I returned to my apartment in Capitol Hill, a one-bedroom that suddenly felt too quiet. My boss at CloudSync, a brilliant but scattered CEO named Dimitri, called within an hour of my landing. Naomi, thank God you're back. The Patterson project is imploding. We have a board meeting in 3 days and I have no idea where half our vendor contracts are. He paused. Also, HR is freaking out about you expensing a family vacation to Hawaii. I'll explain the Hawaii thing, I said, exhaustion creeping into my voice. And I'll handle Patterson. Give me 2 hours. You're a lifesaver, Dimitri said, relief evident. Also, we got the Series B funding. $12 million. We're actually going to survive. For the first time in days, I smiled. CloudSync had been on the brink of collapse for months. $12 million meant we'd make payroll, could hire the engineers we desperately needed, could actually grow. My job was secure. My gamble on staying with the startup instead of taking a safer corporate position had paid off. Marcus's gambles, on the other hand, had destroyed lives. The next morning, I met with Agent Torres at the FBI's Seattle field office. The building was gray concrete and tinted windows designed to intimidate. Inside, the conference room was sterile and cold, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Thank you for coming in, Torres said, setting down a thick folder. We've been conducting additional interviews with your brother's victims. I wanted to share some information with you, both as a courtesy and because you might be called as a witness at trial. She opened the folder and pulled out photographs. This is Margaret Chen. She's 74. She gave your brother her entire retirement savings, $300,000, because he promised her 12% annual returns. She's now working part-time as a cashier at Safeway because her Social Security isn't enough to cover her rent. Next photo. James and Linda Dunlap. Their son has cystic fibrosis. They invested $200,000 that they'd saved for his medical care and eventual lung transplant. Your brother spent $40,000 of it on a down payment for his Tesla. Photo after photo, real people with real faces and real consequences. A young couple whose wedding fund was gone. A middle-aged teacher whose divorce settlement had been invested and lost. An elderly veteran whose VA benefits weren't enough after Marcus spent his savings. Why are you showing me this? I asked, though I knew the answer. Because you need to understand the scope of what your brother did, Torres said. And because in 2 weeks, you'll be sitting in a grand jury hearing, and Marcus's attorney will try to portray him as a good man who made mistakes. I need you to remember these faces when that happens. I studied each photograph carefully, committing them to memory. These were the real victims of Marcus's fraud. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but human beings whose lives had been permanently altered because my brother wanted a luxury lifestyle he couldn't afford. Will any of them get their money back? I asked. Torres shook her head. Maybe 10 cents on the dollar, if we're lucky. The house will be foreclosed and sold, but it's underwater. We'll liquidate everything we can, but it won't be enough. Most of them will never recover financially. That evening, I visited my parents. They'd spent the day with their attorney, learning about their legal options. There weren't many. We can sue him, my father explained, his voice hollow. Join the civil suit with the other victims. Maybe get a judgment against him, but the lawyer said we'd be standing in line behind everyone else, and there's nothing to collect anyway. We should have asked more questions, my mother said, staring at her hands. We should have verified. We should have gotten a second opinion. You trusted your son? I said gently. That's not a failure. That's what parents are supposed to do. Is it? She asked. Because our trust cost us everything we'd saved. It cost all those other people their savings too. At what point does trust become negligence? I didn't have an answer. The grand jury hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in federal court. I sat outside the hearing room for 2 hours before being called in. Inside, 23 ordinary citizens sat in tiered rows, listening to prosecutors explain the intricacies of securities fraud. I was sworn in and asked to identify myself. Then the questions began. Miss Reeves, when did you first suspect your brother was committing fraud? What evidence did you find? Did your brother ever admit to you that his business was fraudulent? Did he express remorse for his victims? I answered each question clearly and precisely. I explained finding the emails, walking through the financial records, contacting the victims. I described Marcus's lifestyle, how it far exceeded what his legitimate business income could support. When Marcus's defense attorney cross-examined me, he tried to suggest I was motivated by jealousy. Isn't it true, Miss Reeves, that you've always resented your brother's success? I resented being made to feel inferior, I corrected, but I wasn't jealous of success built on stolen money. But you didn't know it was stolen money at the time you reported him, did you? You just suspected. I had documentation. Bank records, emails, client statements. I didn't suspect. I knew. The defense attorney tried a different angle. Isn't it possible your brother simply made poor investment decisions? That he lost his clients' money through bad judgment rather than fraud? No, I said firmly, because he never made any investments. The money went directly from client accounts into his operating account, and from there into his personal accounts. He spent it on personal expenses while sending clients fake statements showing gains that didn't exist. That's not poor investment judgment. That's fraud. After 90 minutes, I was dismissed. The grand jury would deliberate and decide whether to indict Marcus. Given the mountain of evidence, the outcome wasn't in doubt. 3 days later, Marcus was formally indicted on 47 counts of wire fraud, 17 counts of securities fraud, and 3 counts of money laundering. The local news covered it extensively. Local financial advisor charged in multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. Vanessa's name appeared in several articles, along with photos of their lavish lifestyle pulled from her Instagram. I received a call from a producer at a local news station. Miss Reeves, we'd love to interview you about your role in uncovering your brother's fraud. Your story is compelling. The sister who brought down her own brother's criminal enterprise. No, thank you, I said. We could frame it as a story about doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. About choosing justice over family loyalty. That's not what this is about, I replied. This isn't about me. It's about 47 people whose lives my brother destroyed. If you want to tell a story, tell theirs. But the media wasn't interested in the victims. They wanted the dramatic family betrayal angle, the sister who turned in her brother. When I continued to refuse interviews, they found other sources. Vanessa gave a tearful interview claiming she'd been deceived just like everyone else. Some of Marcus's former friends appeared on camera expressing shock. He seemed so successful, we had no idea. The court of public opinion was harsh. Online commenters debated whether I was a hero or a traitor. Some praised me for stopping a criminal. Others called me a vindictive sister who destroyed her own family. I stopped reading the comments after someone suggested I'd fabricated the evidence out of jealousy. 2 weeks before Marcus's trial was scheduled to begin, his attorney called my father. Marcus wanted to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecution was offering 12 years instead of the 20 he'd likely get at trial. He wants our permission, my father told me over dinner at their house. Can you believe that? He wants us to tell him it's okay to take the plea deal. What did you say? I told him to do whatever his attorney recommended. And then I hung up. Marcus took the plea deal. On a cold November morning, I sat in the courtroom gallery between my parents as Marcus stood before the judge. He wore a cheap suit, all his expensive clothing had been seized, and his hair needed cutting. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge read through the charges. 47 counts of wire fraud, 17 counts of securities fraud, 3 counts of money laundering. Marcus pled guilty to each one, his voice barely audible. Then came the victim impact statements. Margaret Chen, the 74-year-old working at Safeway, spoke first. Her voice shook but remained strong. Marcus Reeves told me my money would be safe. He called me Aunt Maggie. He came to my house for dinner. And then he stole everything I'd saved over 40 years of working as a nurse. Because of him, I can't retire. I'll probably die working. James Dunlap spoke next. His wife Linda beside him, both in tears. Our son needs a lung transplant. The money we gave Marcus Reeves was supposed to cover the medical expenses insurance won't pay. Now we don't know if we'll be able to afford it when the time comes. Marcus Reeves didn't just steal our money. He stole our son's chance at life. One by one, 17 victims spoke, each story more heartbreaking than the last. Retirements destroyed, college funds vanished, medical care foregone. All so Marcus could drive a Tesla and Vanessa could post photos with designer handbags. When it was my father's turn, he stood slowly. Your Honor, I'm here to speak on behalf of my wife, Patricia, and myself. Marcus Reeves stole $120,000 from us. That represents 30 years of saving, of working extra shifts, of doing without luxuries so we'd have security in retirement. But the money isn't the worst part. The worst part is that we trusted him because he's our son. He looked us in the eye and promised our money was safe while he was spending it on himself. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him for that. The judge looked at Marcus. Mr. Reeves, do you have anything to say? Marcus stood. Your Honor, I want to apologize to everyone I hurt. To my parents, to my clients, to all the people I betrayed. I made terrible decisions. I let greed and pride control me. I'm truly sorry, but his words sounded hollow. Rehearsed. The kind of apology his attorney had crafted to minimize his sentence, not the kind that came from genuine remorse. The judge wasn't impressed. Mr. Reeves, in my 20 years on this bench, I've seen many financial fraudsters. Most of them express remorse only after they're caught. You stole from 74-year-old widows. You stole from families with sick children. You stole from your own parents. And you did it all while living a luxury lifestyle and mocking those less fortunate than you. You don't deserve leniency. You deserve to experience the same fear and insecurity you inflicted on your victims. The gavel came down. 15 years in federal prison. 5 years supervised release after that. Full restitution to all victims, though everyone in the courtroom knew he'd never be able to pay more than a fraction of what he owed. Marcus was handcuffed and led away. He looked back once at our parents. My mother was crying. My father stared straight ahead, his face carved from stone. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with cameras and microphones. I kept my head down and pushed through, my parents flanking me. Miss Reeves, how do you feel about your brother's sentence? Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, will you visit your son in prison? Do you think justice was served? We didn't answer. We just walked to our car and drove away. Marcus was transferred to Federal Correctional Institution Sheridan, a medium-security prison in Oregon, 3 weeks after his sentencing. My mother cried for 2 days straight. My father said nothing at all, which was somehow worse. I threw myself into work. The Series B funding meant CloudSync was expanding rapidly. We hired 15 new engineers, moved to a bigger office in SoDo, and I was promoted to Director of Operations with a $20,000 raise. The startup I'd bet on was finally paying off. In March, 6 months after the trial, the victim restitution process began. A court-appointed trustee liquidated everything Marcus and Vanessa owned. The house sold for $420,000, but after paying off both mortgages and the property liens, the net was $86,000. The Tesla was returned to the leasing company. The furniture, art, and Vanessa's designer clothing and handbags went to auction. In total, the trustee recovered $214,000. Divided among 47 victims with claims totaling $2.7 million, each person received approximately 8 cents per dollar stolen. My parents got $9,600 back. They'd lost $110,400. It's something, my mother said when the check arrived, but her voice was hollow. The civil lawsuits dragged on. Marcus had nothing left to take, but the victims wanted their judgments on record anyway. Future earnings, inheritance, anything he might someday receive would be garnished for the rest of his life. Vanessa's divorce was finalized. She'd convinced the judge she'd been deceived, kept her influencer income, and walked away with minimal financial liability. Her Instagram underwent a complete rebrand. Gone were the luxury lifestyle posts. Now she positioned herself as a survivor of financial abuse and advocate for women's financial literacy. Her follower count actually grew. She leveraged the scandal into sponsorships with budgeting apps and financial planning services, earning more than she had before. I found that particularly galling. Vanessa had known something was wrong. She'd enjoyed the lifestyle funded by stolen money, but she'd crafted a narrative where she was another victim, and the public had bought it. 8 months after Marcus went to prison, my mother finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you think we should visit him? We were having lunch at their house, just the three of us. My father put down his sandwich slowly. Do you want to? He asked his wife. I don't know, she admitted. He's still our son, but I'm so angry at him. I don't know if I can sit across from him and not scream. They both looked at me. I'm not going, I said. I did what I needed to do. I stopped him from hurting more people. But I don't owe him forgiveness or visits or anything else. Don't you want to know how he is? Mom asked. No, I said honestly. I don't. Because whatever he's experiencing in prison, it's nothing compared to what Margaret Chen is experiencing working at 74. It's nothing compared to the Dunlaps praying their son survives long enough for them to save up for his transplant again. Marcus is in prison because he earned it. Those people are suffering because he stole from them. My father nodded slowly. She's right, Patricia. But he's your son, my mother said, tears forming. He was my son, my father replied. The person in prison is someone I don't know, someone who stole from us, lied to us, and showed no real remorse until he was caught. Mom cried then. Deep sobs that shook her shoulders. My father held her while I sat there, feeling like I'd broken something irreparable in my family. But I'd also stopped Marcus from breaking even more families. In June, 1 year after that fateful trip to Hawaii, I received a letter. Prison mail, Marcus's name and inmate number on the return address. I almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity won. Dear Naomi, it began. I've been in prison for 8 months now. I work in the kitchen, make 12 cents an hour, and sleep in a cell with a man who murdered his business partner over a real estate dispute. Every day I think about what I did. Not just the fraud, but how I treated you. How I made you feel less than because you chose an honest path instead of chasing money like I did. You were right about everything. I did steal from our parents. I did destroy people's lives. I told myself I'd pay everyone back, that I just needed time, but that was a lie. I knew there was no legitimate way to earn the returns I'd promised. I knew it was a Ponzi scheme. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant admitting I was a failure. The worst part isn't being in prison. It's knowing that I deserve to be here, that Margaret Chen is working at 74 because of me, that the Dunlap son might die because I spent his medical fund on a car, that Mom and Dad lost their retirement because I wanted to impress people with a lifestyle I couldn't afford. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that you did the right thing. Someone had to stop me. And I'm glad it was you instead of someone else destroying even more lives before they did. Your brother, Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, then I put it in a drawer and didn't respond. 2 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, an automated voice said, "This is a prepaid call from an inmate at Federal Correctional Institution, Sheridan. Will you accept the charges?" I almost hung up, but something made me press 1. Naomi? Marcus's voice was different, smaller. Thank you for accepting. What do you want, Marcus? I just wanted to hear your voice, to tell you I'm sorry. I wrote you a letter, but you didn't respond, and I thought maybe—" "I got the letter," I interrupted. "I just don't have anything to say to you." "That's fair." He paused. "How are Mom and Dad?" "They're surviving. They had to cancel their travel plans. Dad picked up some consulting work to rebuild their savings. Mom volunteers at a food bank now. They're managing. Have they— He couldn't finish the question. "They haven't visited you, if that's what you're asking. And no, I don't think they will. You took their retirement and their trust. That's not something people just get over." I could hear him crying on the other end of the line. Soft, broken sobs. Part of me felt satisfaction. This was justice. This was consequences. The brother who'd waved his first-class ticket in my face was now making 12 cents an hour in a prison kitchen. But another part of me just felt tired. "Naomi, I need you to know I understand now. What I did was unforgivable. I destroyed lives for a Tesla and a nice house, and so people would think I was successful. I was pathetic." "Yes," I agreed. "You were." I think about that moment at the airport all the time. When I waved that boarding pass at you. When I mocked you for flying economy. I was so proud of myself. So sure I was better than you because I had money. Money you stole. "Money I stole," he agreed. "And now I have nothing. No money, no freedom, no family, no future. Just 12 more years in here and then a lifetime of debt I can never repay." "That's what happens," I said. "Actions have consequences. You spent 4 years stealing from people who trusted you. Now you spend 15 years paying for it." "I know. I just wanted you to understand that I finally get it. That you were always the successful one. The one with integrity. The one who did things the right way. I'm going to hang up now, Marcus. Wait, could you tell Mom and Dad I'm sorry? That I think about them every day? They know you're sorry," I said. Being sorry doesn't give them back their retirement. I hung up. For weeks afterward, I questioned whether I'd been too harsh. But every time doubt crept in, I'd think about Margaret Chen working as a cashier, about the Dunlap's sick son, about my parents canceling their retirement dreams. Marcus's 15 years in prison didn't erase any of that suffering. His remorse, genuine or not, didn't make anyone whole. In September, I ran into one of Marcus's former friends at a coffee shop. Derek had been his college roommate, had attended his wedding, had thought he was living the dream. "Naomi, hey," Derek said awkwardly. I saw the news about Marcus. Everyone did. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Turning him in, it took guts. It took seeing my parents' faces when they realized they'd lost everything. I corrected. That's what it took. Derek nodded. I invested with him too. $20,000. My wife and I were saving for a down payment on a house. Now we're starting over. Another victim. Another life affected. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. You stopped him. If you hadn't, he would have kept going. More people would have lost everything. You're a hero, even if it doesn't feel that way." But I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who'd refused to let family loyalty blind me to theft. 2 years after Marcus went to prison, CloudSync was acquired by a major tech company for $87 million. As director of operations with a small equity stake, my payout was $1.2 million after taxes. I paid off my student loans. Bought a small house in West Seattle with a view of the Sound, set aside money for retirement in a properly managed, boring index fund, and I wrote a check to my parents for $120,000. They cried when I gave it to them. "Naomi, we can't accept this," my mother protested. "Yes, you can," I said firmly. "Marcus stole your retirement. I'm giving it back. This is what family actually does. We help each other. We don't steal from each other." They tried to argue, but I wouldn't budge. The check was deposited. Their retirement was restored. They booked a trip to Italy for the following spring, the trip they'd been planning before Marcus destroyed everything. Marcus called again 6 months later. I'd changed my number twice, but somehow he still found it. "Naomi, I heard about your payout. Congratulations. How did you—" "Mom told me. She wrote to me about the money you gave them. That was—" His voice broke. "That was good of you. It's what you should have done," I said. "Earned money honestly and used it to take care of the people you love." I know. I think about that every day in here. About how different things could have been if I'd just been content with a normal life. If I hadn't needed to impress people. "You could have worked hard and built something real," I said. "You're smart, Marcus. You were good at sales, good with people. You could have been successful legitimately, but you wanted the shortcut." I did, and it cost me everything. We were quiet for a moment. Then Marcus asked, "Are you happy, Naomi?" I thought about my question. My house with the view. My job that I'd earned through actual merit. My parents' retirement restored. My conscience clear. "Yes," I said. "I am. Good. You deserve it. You always did." He paused. "I'm glad one of us turned out okay. You could have too," I said. "That's the tragedy of this. You had every advantage. Loving parents, good education, natural charisma. You just chose the wrong path. I know. And I'm going to spend the next 10 years thinking about that." After we hung up, I blocked his number. Not out of anger, but because we didn't have anything more to say to each other. He was serving his sentence. I was living my life. Those paths didn't need to intersect anymore. My parents started visiting him after the 3rd year. They'd drive down to Oregon once a month, sit across from him in the visitation room, and gradually rebuild some connection. Not the relationship they'd had before. That was gone forever. But something new and cautious. I never went. When they'd ask if I wanted to join them, I'd decline politely. "That's your relationship with him. This is mine." Marcus got released after 12 years for good behavior. He moved into a halfway house in Portland, got a job washing dishes at a chain restaurant, and started the decades-long process of paying restitution to his victims. He'd be making payments for the rest of his life, never earning more than poverty wages because every extra dollar would be garnished. He tried to contact me when he got out. I didn't respond. 5 years after his release, he sent one final letter. "Naomi, I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what you did. You saved me from myself. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have kept going until I destroyed even more lives, probably until someone died because they couldn't afford medical care, or until I got myself killed by someone whose life I'd ruined. You gave me a chance to face what I'd done and hopefully become something better. I'm working on that. Every day. It doesn't erase anything. But maybe someday I'll be able to look in the mirror without hating what I see. Thank you for being the sister I never deserved. Marcus." I read that letter once and put it in the same drawer as the first one. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe not. What mattered was that the Margaret Chens of the world stopped working at 74 because I'd stepped in. The Dunlaps got their son's transplant through donations and fundraising after their story went public. My parents got to take their dream trip to Italy. Justice wasn't perfect. It never is. But it was something. And sitting in my living room, watching the sunset over Puget Sound, I knew I'd made the right choice. Family loyalty doesn't mean protecting criminals. It means protecting victims, even when one of the victims is your own moral compass. Marcus waved a first-class boarding pass in my face and thought he'd won. But I'd won something better. I'd looked in the mirror every day for 7 years and liked the person looking back. That was worth more than all the first-class tickets in the world.